Hey, I'm Kier. I'm 20-something years old, an aspiring filmmaker, full-time marketing videographer and editor, and a die-hard fan of movies, and a magician, if you're into that. I've been producing content online for years, and I've been making videos for about as long as I can remember, and I've made a pretty sweet living doing what I do. Okay, maybe not that sweet. But what I love, what I want, what I crave, and what I spend every minute of my life pining over is film. When I was about 10 years old, my mom bought my brother and I a camcorder and a 4-pack of those VHS tapes, and we spent the entire summer making home videos about anything that two tween wannabe Kevin Smiths would make.
What's up, guys? This is Guillermo. We finished our first full-length film. Kevin, you see that flick? You see that flick, man? That's a good flick, man.
Good times. Fast forward a couple years later, I'm a little bit older and starting to realize what kind of shitty pop culture addicted preteen bag of hormones that I wanted to be, and this old camcorder has seen it all. Well, maybe not all of it. So what did two aspiring filmmakers do in a small town in Oregon during the summer? Well, we produced our first movie, a movie that had no budget outside of whatever we could find in our piggy banks, a movie that took over a year to make, a movie that awakened something inside of me that I would never ever forget. This wasn't a home movie. This was a full 90-minute, fully realized, fully edited, acted, and produced movie. A movie that premiered to our friends and family, a movie that pushed us beyond what we thought we could do, a movie that we would eventually end up accidentally selling in a garage sale along with that old camcorder, never to be seen again. A movie that made me.
Now, this movie, we don't have a name yet, but I'm really looking forward to doing what I like to do, act.
Now, I might never see my first movie ever again. And as sad as that does make me, and it does, I think that it's kind of interesting and it adds a little bit of, I don't know, mystique or something to the idea that it's probably just sitting in someone's attic somewhere undiscovered. But one thing that I will always take with me, and something that can never be sold at any garage sale, is what making that movie did for me and to me. Movies are not only something that we enjoy consuming and experiencing and escaping into, but for a good bulk of people, telling stories is part of who we are. And on a daily basis, either it's a quote from a movie, a reference from a movie, a song you maybe heard in a movie that you can't get out of your head, those movies are there and they stick with you. And anytime you create something, a little bit of that inspiration is always going to be there. And I think that is so fascinating. Statistically, did you know that it is practically impossible for you to shuffle a deck of cards into a random order and find anybody else on the planet who has shuffled the cards into that same sequence? That's kind of how I feel about movies. I feel that every movie you see is an amalgamation of every movie the director has seen before it. How insane is that? I personally find it remarkable, unbelievable, exciting, and extremely fascinating. And in today's episode, we are going to be talking about a question that I get asked all the time in my Q&As.
What inspires you to make videos, you idiot wannabe?
So strap in, because today we're going to be taking a look at my top 5 films that inspire me to make videos. This isn't necessarily going to be a top 5 films of all time video. It's more going to be the 5 movies that every single time I watch them, they inspire me to create something. You can also take this as a list of recommendations. So if you're looking for something to watch this weekend, you are sure to find something inspiring on this list. All of that coming up, but of course, before we get into it, I hope you'll consider subscribing and of course, drop a like on the video. It helps. All right, formalities out of the way. I'm Kier Gomes, and these are the movies that made me. All right, so the first one we're gonna cover is probably my favorite film of all time. And I'm not being hyperbolic, I think it's literally my favorite movie, and that is Rushmore by Wes Anderson.
What's the secret, Max?
The secret?
Yeah, well, you seem to have it pretty figured out.
Secret? I don't know. I think you just gotta find something you love to do and then do it for the rest of your life.
So this movie came out in 1998. It was written by Owen Wilson, and it was the second film to be directed by Wes Anderson. You probably already know who Wes Anderson is, and if you don't, you probably could identify one of his movies in a lineup, as they are so unique, symmetrical, colorful, quirky, and brilliant. But for my money, it doesn't get any better than Wes Anderson's directing in Rushmore. Rushmore follows the story of Max Fisher, who is a 15-year-old, kind of outcast, not sure who he wants to be yet, student at a private school called Rushmore. Max is definitely not cool and doesn't have a lot of friends, but the one friend that he does manage to make happens to be a completely not age-appropriate love interest, and that is Rosemary Cross, a teacher at Rushmore. The movie immediately gives you a sense of who the character is, and that's something that I think in any movie is so important, to just establish who it is that you're rooting for in the movie. Max prides himself on his involvement in the extracurriculars at Rushmore, however, is a terrible student and is on the verge and eventually does end up getting kicked out. Hilarity ensues when his best friend slash frenemy slash love interest, played brilliantly and comedically by Bill Murray, clash heads over the heart of Miss Cross. It's quirky, it's weird, it's funny, it'll make you laugh, cry, and kind of everything in between, and at the end of the day, the film is shot beautifully. You can see some early Wes Anderson trademarks in there in terms of symmetry, but this time done practically against a real set, whereas nowadays Wes Anderson will use miniatures and more expensive set design. By the way, not saying there's anything wrong with that, I love Wes Anderson films. By the way, check out The French Dispatch if you haven't yet. It's on HBO Max, it's good. But what I really love about this film and what I think takes me into another place when I'm watching it is that I relate so much to Max as a younger person. And then the older I get, I relate so much to Bill Murray as an older person. And I think it's a movie that grows with you, and you can see it from the two different perspectives of the two vastly different main characters. It withstands the test of time, and I think Wes and Owen did a great job at writing this story, and it is one that has inspired me so much so far. All right, next up we are gonna be talking Lords of Dogtown by Catherine Hardwicke.
Wow. This wave breaks 24 hours a day, every day. And you know what, bros? We're gonna be the first to ride it.
First of all, please do more movies like this. This is a biographical film that doesn't just follow the biography of one person, it follows the biography of multiple people. Along with a stunning cast of, at the time, pretty much unknown actors, this film brought everything together that you would want to see from a grimy, vintage skateboard phenomenon. There are some superstars or people that would rise to superstardom, as Emile Hirsch is in the movie as one of the main characters, Jay Adams, and you see Skip Inglum portrayed by the brilliant Heath Ledger, as well as a cameo appearance from Johnny Knoxville plays a small role, which I also really enjoyed. This movie has a brilliant graininess to it. It was obviously shot on film. It was extremely colorful. The color grading made you feel like you were in the vintage pastel vibe of the 1970s. As well, they portray LA and specifically Venice Beach as this dirty, seedy, kind of grimy beach, and it really does a good job of giving you that disgusting surfer vibe that the movie was going for. The movie balances the tone really well, which makes it very easy to watch and extremely rewatchable. You have a good time kind of following the excitement and the ride that these skateboarders go on and their rise to fame and everything that comes with it. But aside from a huge emotional turn towards the end of the movie, you also do get these undertones of struggle throughout the entire film, and I think that it really brings a sense of empathy to these characters. Stacy Peralta was a consultant on the film. I believe he even helped produce it, and he, of course, is one of the main characters of the film. In most movies, I feel like you can tell when something has been dramified from a true story into something a little bit larger than the true story, but this movie does a great job of giving you feasible feats that these characters achieve and really making you believe that this is the entire story. In general, I really would love to see Catherine Hardwicke do more movies like this, and I would love to see more women directors doing films that hit this heavy in general. I think that the world will be a better place for it, and I really enjoyed this movie, so, you know, make me happy. Number 3 is probably also an all-time favorite of mine and definitely deserves to be on this list, but the inspiration I get from this film goes back to the very first time I saw it, and that is Almost Famous by Cameron Crowe.
And you can tell Rolling Stone magazine that my last words were I'm on drugs.
If you guys want to talk about an underrated director, Cameron Crowe is the pinnacle of underrated directors. Cameron Crowe has made movies like Jerry Maguire, Say Anything, Almost Famous, Vanilla Sky, some of the greatest movies ever. His best one, in my opinion, is the semi-autobiographical Almost Famous, which was released in 2000. Man, I was young when I saw this movie, and again, our main character is a young 15 to 16-year-old kid trying to find his place in a world unfamiliar to him. This movie, I'm not joking, it changed the way I see movies. The first time I saw this movie, I related to it so much, and I related to every single thing in the movie. It made me realize that telling my own story could one day make a movie.
Amen.
The older I get, the realize it's probably not gonna happen. My story's quite boring. Almost Famous follows William Miller, who is kind of a representation of the director Cameron Crowe in his youth at 15 years old. William aspires to be a writer and specifically a journalist for rock and roll bands in the 70s. Now for him, the ideal opportunity comes along when Rolling Stone offers him a chance to tour with one of his favorite bands and write an article about them. Of course, the story goes far beyond following a band on tour. There's all kinds of misadventures, first times, last times, again, heartbreaking tragedy, while at the same time you can turn around and laugh because of something hilarious that's happening in this adventurous world where nobody is comfortable.
Is this Marianne with the pot?
The soundtrack is amazing, the direction of course is really good, and I think what really sells me on this movie is the performances from the extremely talented cast. This movie stars Patrick Fugit, who is a pretty underrated and kind of unknown actor, but as well you see the faces of Kate Hudson as well as Billy Crudup and Jason Lee, and my favorite character in the entire movie, which is Lester Bangs, played expertly by the late Philip Seymour Hoffman. We miss you. And speaking of Philip Seymour Hoffman, did you know his son is an actor? In fact, he was just in Licorice Pizza, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, which reminds me, let's get to the next movie on the list. All right, next we're gonna be talking about a movie that is not one of my favorite movies, but definitely a movie that does something for me in terms of inspiration. That movie is 2002's Punch Drunk Love by Paul Thomas Anderson. Now, it's hard to talk about film without talking about P.T. Anderson, am I right? The guy just knows how to make good movies. If you guys don't know who Paul Thomas Anderson is, if you've seen movies like Magnolia or Boogie Nights or Punch Drunk Love, or of course his new film Licorice Pizza, which stars the son of Philip Seymour Hoffman, something that I am very excited for. Punch Drunk Love follows the main character Barry, who is played by Adam Sandler in his definitely most dramatic role up to that time. Barry is a lonely, socially awkward man who calls a phone sex line to help quell the loneliness. What unfolds is a very, very interesting and weird and oddly motivated adventure by Barry to intervene in the situation. Now, what I love about this movie, again, is kind of the balance of tone. You see Barry go through kind of a extreme character arc, but in a very subtle way. Barry's a very insecure person, despite not needing to be. He owns his own business, he makes enough money to live, so he must be doing okay. But when he meets Lena, who is a friend of his sister's, he falls in love, and that changes his behavior, it changes the way he sees things. But rather than just getting that straight love story, the movie intertwines it with a little bit of drama and a little bit of suspense even. It's a very interesting movie. It's hard to explain why you should watch it and why it's so inspiring, but trust me, see the film one time, and if you don't feel like making a movie after that, then, well, come back and comment, let me know. All right, and coming in at number 5 is a more recent film, but this is definitely another favorite of mine, but specifically, probably my favorite horror movie ever made. We are giving number 5 to It, Chapter 1, directed by Anthony Muchietti.
I saw something. There was this
Clown. Yeah, I saw him too.
Look. It's all connected by the sewers. That's where it lives.
Now, this movie was not only a pleasant surprise, but it was one that I am still ready to go to war for if you think this is not the definitive It movie. Now, I know I'm probably gonna get a lot of shade in the comments for saying this, but I'm not the biggest fan of the miniseries 1990 Tim Curry It. Hold on. I love Tim Curry. I think he did a phenomenal job as It. He's one of my favorite actors, but the movie needed updating, did it not? It Chapter 1 gives you everything you would want to see from a true horror movie, especially based on Stephen King, but it also introduces a new scope and a blockbuster budget that allows for the movie to go places that the other one simply couldn't go. Now listen, I think Tim Curry did a wonderful job as Pennywise, but I really think that Bill Skarsgård brought something to this clown that made him more menacing, more scary, and ultimately the stuff of nightmares. I'm not joking. I have nightmares. But this movie's cinematography was brilliant. Every single shot looked like it could have been taken out of a Stephen King based comic book. It's like the words written in the It novel were brought perfectly to screen without so much as a scratch that wasn't supposed to be there. I love the cast of kids in this movie, and I think it's awesome that most of them have grown up to do even bigger things in their early teens and now I guess into their early 20s. But the one thing that makes this movie stand out to me as a filmmaker and as somebody who enjoys movies is the idea of contrast. The thing that I love about this movie is that you see this cast of kids as kind of the heroes of the story, and every single adult figure in this movie is sickening or evil or twisted or creepy. Anthony Muchietti just did a great job of directing the film in such a way that the adults seem like out of touch, scary, creepy, shadowy figures, and these kids are kind of the only beam of light in this terrifying scenario. Couple that with a satisfying ending and then the ultimate disappointment, which was It Chapter 2, this movie stands on its own to me as one of the greatest horror films of all time.
And now? I'm gonna have to kill this fucking clown.
Welcome to the Losers Club, asshole!
Okay, let's talk about some honorable mentions. Now, I wanted to originally make this a top 10, but I have a feeling this video is running long as it is, so these next 5 are gonna be ones that definitely inspire me to make movies, but maybe not as much as the 5 that I already mentioned. Breakfast Club by John Hughes. That's just one of my favorite movies. I don't know if it's so much that it inspires me to make a film as much as I just relate so much to each character in that movie in my own way. And again, as I get older, I think I can relate even more to it. So overall, brilliant movie. I could put any John Hughes movie on this list, honestly. Next is another new one. We're talking Nightmare Alley by Guillermo del Toro. Guillermo del Toro is one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. I love his eye for cinema, his practical effects, the way he can make movies with budgets as low as he does. And I mean, come on, did you see the Hellboy movies? Did you see them? So yeah, Nightmare Alley, great performances, involves a little bit of magic, a lot of mysticism, but the way that that film was shot, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. My hat's off. Next, we got Catch Me If You Can. That movie is just a brilliant movie, but what really inspires me about that movie is how long it is and how much happens over the course of it, but it's still rewatchable. For me, most movies that exceed 2.5 hours, they're hard to rewatch because it's so much. This movie I could rewatch any day of the week, don't care how long it is, I love it. Next we got The Shining by Stanley Kubrik. Now Stanley Kubrik, depending on how you see him or depending on how you see his films, could be seen as pretentious, especially for the era, but I really enjoy his cinematography in The Shining. The wide angle lenses, the big set pieces, the intense cinematography of the chase scenes between Jack and his family. It's a movie that I could watch any day of the week. It could be a rainy day, it could be a sunny day, it could be Halloween, it could be Christmas. I don't care, I love The Shining. And finally, another new one, we have Extraordinary, directed by Mike Ahern. Now, this was a weird one that my wife and I discovered on Showtime randomly. It's kind of a Irish folktale meets, it's kind of like a Irish indie low-budget Ghostbusters, if you can imagine that. And it is very funny, very good. It stars Will Forte, one of the funniest people in Hollywood, I think. If you don't know Will Forte, he plays MacGruber. Maybe you've heard of him. Anyway, brilliant cinematography. I love the color grading of this movie. I love the kind of faded film grain that it has. It looks as good as it is, and the movie's fantastic. So take with that whatever you want. So there you have it, guys. There is your list. These are the films that made me. And by that, I mean they're either films that shaped who I am as a person, down to core and moral beliefs. They're films that identify with me, that I identify with. And they're films that at the end of the day, every single time I watch them, inspire something in me to create something myself. I'm gonna be leaving the titles for all the movies that I talked about in today's video in the description, so if you guys wanna check those out, please do. I highly recommend it. Some of them are super underrated, and I'm sure you would appreciate them. So the next time you find yourself in a little bit of a creative slump, maybe one of these movies can help inspire your next idea, and it could be your greatest idea yet. Well guys, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do like if you did like it. Please leave a comment letting me know what other types of videos or movies you would like to hear me talk about. All that being said, I hope everybody watching has a wonderful rest of their day. I know I will. And remember, film it or it didn't happen.